So the deal still has to go through Parliament, and that could be tricky. Remember, Johnson's predecessor saw her deal with the EU rejected 3 times. But if it does go through, what does it mean for us here in Southern Africa? To discuss, we're joined by David Butler, who is a former CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the UK. He's a security risk analyst and director at BRG Partners. David, you join us on the line. Thank you. What do you think of the deal? And tell us how this avoids, simply if you can, the dreaded border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Good evening. Yes, thank you. The deal is pretty much a rehash of the original deal that was agreed by Theresa May's government and the EU. The difference here, of course, is that in that deal, the backstop was that the whole of the United Kingdom would remain within effectively the EU customs and regulatory environment. The difference now is that Boris Johnson has negotiated that only Northern Ireland would remain within if there was no agreement on a trade deal. And the issue there, of course, is that would normally mean that there would be customs checks on the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. But I think from my understanding of the deal is that the agreement is that the custom checks would now be in the sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. And as you pointed out rightly, goods due from the UK into Northern Ireland that weren't then going to onward transit into Southern Ireland and the EU would be tariff-free, but the complexity is in the paperwork. So the discussions and where the negotiations have taken time is how would this manifest in reality with regards to custom checks and fees and tariffs, etc. But that would remove the issue of any sort of border checks at all between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and as a consequence, it would comply with the spirit and the letter of the Good Friday Agreement.
But now, of course, it depends what Northern Ireland thinks, and the big question is: will Boris Johnson get this through Parliament on Saturday? What do you think?
I don't think Boris Johnson will get it through Parliament on Saturday. The DUP, who have been propping up the Conservative government through both Theresa May and to a certain, theoretically, Boris Johnson's government, have been unequivocal today in saying that they disagree and they will not support Boris Johnson's deal. And the reason for that is that the DUP will not get a veto on the agreement, and the way it's structured, requiring a majority of the Stormont to agree, would mean that over a period of time, it is likely from the DUP's eyes that the economic sensible path would be for a united Ireland. And of course they can't countenance that at all. Their view is that Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom will always remain so. Yeah. So they're basically voting with their feet, and they're not going to join. And then, of course, Jeremy Corbyn will whip the Labour MPs to go against the deal, because in his eyes and in Labour's eyes, it's not a good deal according to their criteria. And then some of the rogue Conservative MPs that had their whips withdrawn, some of them want a deal because they want their whips back, but quite a few of them, won't countenance the deal. So when the numbers don't look like they're there for Boris Johnson on Saturday, so he's got a lot of work to do tomorrow. The good news, of course, is that, yet again, there is a deal between the UK government and the EU. It's just got to get through UK Parliament.
So we as South Africa have been hoping that we could get a great trade deal with the UK when it leaves, if it leaves. We've been trying to position ourselves. Does this mean anything for us? And if it does, what does it mean?
Well, it obviously means that once the UK and part of Boris Johnson's strategy and the ERG strategy is that by casting off the shackles of the European Union, and that's a phrase that's like the government likes to use, is they're able to strike deals with all and sundry, and that includes former Commonwealth, as well as the United States, which I think is the holy grail. The issue is that the government hasn't got the experience, the civil service hasn't got the experience to negotiate quickly and efficiently those deals. And they're not easy, they don't happen very quickly, and there's always a lot of sort of backwards and forwards in the negotiations. So, yes, in theory, in the sort of medium to long term, there could be a fantastic deal between South Africa and the UK. But as we all know, and I think everybody's sort of in agreement, in the short term, post leaving the EU, it's going to be relatively chaotic. And certainly in the priority list, South Africa is going to come somewhere down the priority, though there is an opportunity for it to go up the priority level if the UK is able to recruit enough people that are able to negotiate trade deals. But obviously the US is top of the list.
And of course, I mean, good for us if there is an avoidance of the chaos, if I can put it that way. What happens if this deal doesn't go through? Because there is now a law that essentially says Boris Johnson has to ask for an extension. Do you think he will comply? And then could we say, okay, at least now the chaotic no-deal Brexit is off the table?
I think yes. I think that Boris Johnson might, that although there is some backwards and forwards, I think that realistically Boris Johnson has no choice but to follow the Benn Act and write to the EU requesting for an extension. And I think the EU will have already got a letter ready to go, and will give that extension. And their criteria will be, I think that the deal is the deal that's on the table. And the requirement of the extension is either a referendum or a general election. But Boris Johnson wants a general election because he wants to be able to not have to rely on the DUP. He wants to be able to put the Brexit party to bed effectively. And at the moment, he's gunning for a general election because he sees that he's quite popular in the polls. Labour would also like a general election, but there are lots of signals in the Labour strategists team that potentially, because Jeremy Corbyn's at the helm, that there could be an issue, and therefore there's quite a push from certain factions in Labour to say no, we don't want a general election until we've had a confirmatory referendum. So it is quite complex, but either way, if the deal doesn't get through on Saturday, which my analysis shows it probably won't, then Boris Johnson will write to the EU. There will be a further extension, and before they're able to talk or leave with a no deal, there will be a general election. If Boris Johnson wins and wins handily, then he will force through the deal that's currently on the table. If he doesn't win, then all bets are off. But I'm saying I'm not predicting anything. No, it's a fool's game to predict what's going to happen in this game.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, the world waits, and thank you for that great analysis. That was Director at BRG Partners and the former CEO of the SA Chamber of Commerce in the UK for us, David Butler.